Hello and welcome back to the Debatable Discussions podcast. Today you join us for another exciting episode as we're going to delve into the Iran and Israel conflict. So Diane, can you perhaps provide a brief overview of what is happening in the world and, well, I guess again, Israel dominates the headlines.
Well, they do. And I'm sure a lot of our viewers have seen those videos from Beirut, mostly from Lebanon, with people enjoying a night out and bombs and missiles lighting up the sky.
I mean, it's
In
shocking, really. Yeah.
the recent attacks happening both from Israel towards Iran and from Iran towards Israel. It's really interesting, I think, because that does just show if where we've come to, people in the middle, in Lebanon especially, because they're caught in that sort of middle area next to the conflict, are just finding this normal. There is no fear of seeing the missiles in the sky. There's quite a famous video of this guy singing, playing the saxophone, whilst people are unfortunately dying in the recent attacks. So, we've seen what Trump is saying, and Trump says the following thing, I quote, Israel must unconditionally surrender. And he says that at least for now, he's not going to kill Ayatollah Khomeini. I don't know what this statement is. I don't know how the US president can say that he's going to not kill a leader for now. What do you think about that, John?
Yeah, I mean, I think with Trump, his reaction to the whole conflict has been just slightly bizarre, perhaps characteristic of himself anyway.
Yeah.
A quick summary for our listeners who don't know, but beginning on Friday, the 13th of June, Israel attacked military sites across Iran. In particular, they sort of aimed at these nuclear sites. And this whole operation was actually called Operation Rising Lion. So they've done around 50 strikes on Tehran and the surrounding area,
Yeah.
all aimed at these military sites. And I believe they've actually made quite a bit of progress in stopping Iran's, quite fearsome nuclear armory. Another sort of talking about famous clips, Diane, there was obviously that one that went viral across social media of those people in that Beirut sort of terrace with a saxophonist as they can see this horrendous sight of missiles raining down on Iran. However, there's also been another one go very popular, and that is actually there was an Israeli strike. I think it was on the Iranian state television service, and the presenter literally had to leave the room as you could see, sort of the walls and the ceiling was crumbling. But Trump, as you said there, Diane, he's tried to renew his role as international peace broker. He's sort of encouraging, one would presume, Iran and Israel to enter an agreement. This is amidst claims that they have had no involvement in these strikes.
That's just outrageous, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can't really say we've had no engagement in the strikes, and then I'm actually going to do this now. I'm going to search up Benjamin Netanyahu's Instagram page.
And once you do that, let's
get a direct quote. And actually, I have gotten one. Israeli forces control the skies of Tehran. I am proud of our country's security force. We will win together. It's just outrageous. Trying to actually say these things and trying to get people to believe you when clearly clearly both sides have really lost the plot because, and I agree, Iran's nuclear program is a cause for concern, but so is Israel's. Israel should not have nuclear weapons, and they do.
Yeah.
For me, that's concerning. Pakistan having nuclear weapons is also equally concerning. India having nuclear weapons is equally concerning. There is no reason for these people to have nuclear weapons. The only countries that should have nuclear weapons, as agreed by international law, are Russia, the US, the UK, France, and China.
Yeah.
As the P.
I see that idea of nuclear weapons, as you mentioned there, we'll go back to Trump in a second, but that is very interesting because obviously with nuclear weapons, when one country has nuclear weapons, for them to be a deterrent, you also have to have nuclear weapons. And you sort of enter this cycle of which countries have this sort of mutual, almost this relationship with each other, where they mutually know they won't strike one another because of their nuclear potential. But
Yeah.
to carry on that deterrent, they further develop their own nuclear weapons. And therefore, we've seen countries, as you mentioned, they're like Pakistan, like Iran, like Israel. These are countries that want to be big players on the world stage. And how do they do this? By creating a nuclear arsenal, which is frankly terrifying, isn't it? Because I mean, the
Yeah.
consequences of nuclear war are destruction. There's no sort of there's no leeway in that. It's complete destruction. Therefore, I think, yeah, I mean, perhaps let's sort of explore that idea, Dan. What's your take on nuclear weapons? They're obviously a deterrent, but would you be an advocate for a complete ban of them? Let's say,
Well, I would for a couple of reasons. I'm not sure it'd be the most practical. I'll say that up front because I think it's very hard when dealing with people such as Putin, Kim Jong Un,
yeah,
Donald Trump to actually believe anything they say. I wouldn't really trust any of these people when I ask for the time alone if they've gotten rid of their nuclear weapons. In theory, if we didn't have these three characters and more, but these three big players, the idea of getting rid of nuclear weapons is a very good one because it sort of brings back the potential for destruction hugely. Now, some might argue, and I do see their point, is that nuclear weapons actually cause more peace because
yeah,
less potent countries get involved less in war. I don't think that's true. I think you look at the USA, they've gotten involved in about every single conflict in the last 30 years, even if they have nuclear weapons. Maybe not directly, but they still provide weapons, intelligence, etc., etc., etc. So, my big reason for getting rid of nuclear weapons is simply because, again, we have a couple of people who have access to these that I simply do not trust with the world. You know, Trump having a big red button, Putin having a big red button, Kim Jong Un having a big red button is just not sustainable in the
yeah,
simplest terms. You can't try to preserve and build a world when you've got multiple people. You can just do this and have the whole place blow up.
yeah. I mean, I agree with that. And I agree with your stance there. And I do think it's also a very good counter argument as well that obviously they do sort of encourage peace in this paradoxical way because they are a deterrent for invasion because one would know the consequences of destruction. But likewise with you, Diane, refuting that, I would say, can't conventional military force also be a deterrent because that can cause a lot of destruction?
Yeah,
And the whole unpredictability thing is really imperative in the modern day because just the other day I was reading that actually this is the UK's nuclear weapon. So I'd imagine China, Russia's, and the USA's are far stronger. But just the UK's, I think nuclear arsenal is individually 50 times stronger than the bombs dropped on Hiroshima. Now that bomb managed to basically wipe out an entire city. Therefore, that just sort of goes to show how much stronger and more harmful and dangerous nuclear weapons are at the moment since World War II. And actually, the level of destruction it would cause has transitioned probably from this national scale to actually a global one. I think the
yeah. I
effects
think
of the bomb would be global.
I do think Russia and the USA definitely have weapons that can blow up continents. Maybe not huge continents, but I think
Nevertheless,
if
yeah,
you drop a bomb in the sort of center of Europe, you could have pretty devastating effects all around.
yeah, and I think Putin wouldn't, but at the end of the day, one thing I think anyone would agree is that no one knows what goes on in his head, and you want to eliminate that risk. But going back over to Trump and the Iran Israel conflict that has raged on for the past 5 days since the time of recording, with Israel attacking nuclear sites in Iran. Trump, as you said, Diane, has been quite characteristically unpredictable about this. You mentioned how he said, at least not for now, we are not going to kill Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. What do you have to say about this? I mean, at least not for now is quite an interesting statement. Does that mean
I
later?
think it's an outrageous statement.
Yeah.
So just quickly, I think it's an outrageous statement. I don't think as a president of a state you can make the claim that you are thinking about assassinating another world leader, whether you agree with them or not. This is things that Stalin used to do.
Yeah.
Things that, I mean, I don't really want to say this, but not even Hitler did that. Not even the meanest of the mean, Hitler, Mao, did that. You cannot go around saying that at least for now, implying that maybe in the future you are going to kill Ayatollah Khomeini. It's not the US's business, frankly. And two, it's illegal.
Yeah. I mean, in fact, there probably are actually comparisons with Hitler. I mean, Hitler probably did want to assassinate world leaders. But yeah, it's totally ridiculous that Trump would say something of that degree, but very characteristically Trump. And another statement he said is, we know exactly where Ayatollah is. He is an easy target, but is safe there. That whole language of target, at least not for now. I mean, is he saying on the world stage that he's about to assassinate the leader of Iran? I mean, both you and me, Dan, we think
it does seem like it.
Yeah, both of us think he's Ayatollah's a callous, heartless individual, but we probably wouldn't say, well, we're thinking about assassinating him later on. I mean, that's sort of the opposite of diplomacy. Another thing that's Trump's done as well, sort of further stoking the chaos of the situation, is that he sort of encouraged Iranians to flee. And we've got this situation of around 10 million people in Tehran trying to flee, but they've got nowhere to go. So it's just created this mass hysteria, mass panic in the city.
I mean, I do think this is a bit, I think maybe this is sort of my more Chomsky wing coming out, but it's just classic USA involvement in the Middle East.
Yeah.
We've had Syria, and we all know how that went. Obviously not very well. Basically brought the country to its knees, destroyed
the US
it,
a mixed track record,
caused the greatest migrant crisis in history, and now they're about to do the same thing in Iran. And now, just instead of Bashar al-Assad, now you've got Ayatollah Khomeini as the target, and it's just, again, that sort of track record just does not make me more comfortable and at ease at all. The opposite, to be honest, because I am afraid we're going to have another migrant crisis. I think we might have another long, prolonged war in the Middle East that's going to end with destruction, economic just non-existence, and a country being brought to its knees. I mean, you look at the leader of Syria. He's a former ISIS member or Al-Qaeda member. I'm not sure which one of the two, but it's one of them. Because apparently it was the only place he could get political experience in.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I mean, do we really want to repeat Syria?
Yeah.
Is it really a smart move to start making the same things that have happened before?
Yeah. I mean, I guess the US wasn't directly involved in the Syrian leader coming recently in the coup. But I mean, as you said, Diane, that is a very Chomsky-esque take on it. And the US, as you said there, they do have a mixed sort of negative, one could easily say, track record in the Middle East.
Especially in the Middle East, yeah.
Despite the Monroe Doctrine, which is the traditional US doctrine, saying that they should be isolationist, they are very interventionist in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And I think it was very interesting, but someone from the Middle East was recently telling me about how they view there is this Western perception of the Middle East as this hotbed of regional conflict and hostility. And if you think perhaps about US involvement in the Middle East and about all these events that have taken that place there, one's perception of the Middle East is almost quite clouded. as one does associate it with warfare, which is a very wrongful
Yeah.
association for a region which is so rich in culture, rich in history. Yeah. Perhaps as a final thing, Diane, we could also mention the recent G7 summit in Canada. So sort of classic.
There we can. Just before I interrupted, I was scrolling through social media today for some reason, and I end up on a sort of pro-Republican page with the G7 summit, and it showed the approval ratings of presidents
Oh
or
right.
leaders present at the G7 summit. I mean, it was just outrageous. Trump having the second highest approval rating.
Oh wow, that surprises me.
Well, no, but it's not true.
Oh, oh yeah.
Because allegedly Trump had a 40+% approval with Sir Friedrich Merz, the German chancellor who just got elected, having something of about 30%.
Oh yeah.
Now the election happened about 2 months ago, and he got about 45% of the votes. So
Yeah.
I don't see how these people are getting these numbers. But it is just this world we live in where unless you're quite attuned to fake news and quite ready to intercept them, you can
Yeah,
see something like that and actually think
it's
Friedrich
true.
Merz, Emmanuel Macron, basically every leader apart from Trump and Giorgia Meloni had horrible numbers.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and as you said there, one's perception of Trump would be changed by this sort of fake news endemic that strikes the world. But at G7, one would have to say that Comical Don striked again at G7 this year. Comical Don obviously being Comical Donald Trump, because there were a few interesting slip ups, I thought, that made the whole event quite funny. Firstly, the UK US trade deal. This was previously negotiated when Starmer was over in Washington. It was things such as the lowering of aluminium tariffs, agreeing sort of number of car imports. However, when they did the sort of the photo shoot for announcing this deal, Trump did actually drop all the pages of the deal from this book it was in onto the floor. And you had this interesting thing where Trump was holding it and Starmer was sort of having to pick up all these pieces of paper off the floor. Then I'll ask for your reaction on this one, Diane. But in characteristic Donald Trump style, he sort of showed his boastful and one could say rather arrogant personality with some comments towards Emmanuel Macron. Macron presumed that Trump had left G7 a day early to sort of negotiate a ceasefire with Iran and Israel. However, Trump has claimed this is not what he was going to do. And this is a comment from Truth Social, the social media platform he does own, about Emmanuel Macron, taken as a reaction to this comment. Publicity seeking President Emmanuel Macron of France mistakenly said that I left the G7 summit in Canada to go back to DC to work on a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. Wrong. Emmanuel always gets it wrong. Stay tuned. What to say about these perhaps rather arrogant comments from Donald Trump,
I
Diane?
mean, again, it's just not a great way to do
It's
diplomacy,
not,
is
yeah,
it? When France is probably the US's biggest ally at the moment, France and Germany in the EU, because I think there's a genuine sort of part of the EU that absolutely dislikes America nowadays
yeah,
and think that EU should be much less reliant on America, stop importing things from America, put big tariffs on America, and basically just cut down US corporations in the European Union until Trump gets his act together. I think Emmanuel Macron and Friedrich Merz, but mostly Emmanuel Macron, actually were reasonable with Trump. We saw that meeting with Macron and Trump. I thought we were very cordial, went very well. And again, Macron is one of those people in Europe at the moment who are running the show.
yeah,
He is, in my opinion, I've said this before, the number one guy in Europe at the moment. Every time there's a Ukraine summit, he's there, he's leading it, he's hosting. Much more than Keir Starmer, and slightly more than the new German Chancellor, who's obviously got some big issues, economic issues in Germany to deal with. But Emmanuel Macron has always been the US's number one ally. when it comes to foreign policy in the sort of European landscape. I find it incredibly stupid to make these comments when it wasn't anything insulting. If Macron said Trump went home to play golf a day early, fine. You know,
Probably true.
you can see that. I mean, it was probably true, but the guy genuinely said you're going back to work on this world-changing piece. You could just take it
Yeah.
and thank him for the best wishes instead of making these arrogant comments. That I've got another question now. If you weren't going back to negotiate a trade deal, what were you doing?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that is a
Not a
very
trade deal, a ceasefire. If you weren't going back to negotiate a ceasefire, what were you doing?
that is a very good question. But I think it has been, as you said there, Diane, a trope of Trump's second presidency. This rather demeaning look, this demeaning perspective upon Europe. This is reflected in this quote he said on Truth Social towards Emmanuel Macron of France. And he downplays the significance of Europe hugely. I think this idea of America first, he's obviously always campaigned for this idea, but he believes it a bit almost too much. He believes in Americans' sort of reliance almost too much, and he should actually look at the role of Europe. Anyway,
Yeah, I think generally the administration has been a bit ignorant because there was this press conference with Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, and she was replying to some French politician in the European Parliament who made a statement. And her sort of response was, you should be thanking us because if we didn't come in 1945, you would still be speaking German. And that just shows the sort of complete ignorance because if the French didn't come in the US in the 18th century, the US would probably still be a colony.
Still be a colony. Yeah, that is
So,
very. Yeah.
you know, I just wanted to ask you before we end, what do you think about this sort of bust up between Trump and Gavin Newsom recently on Twitter and other social media platforms?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't covered it on the podcast. Obviously, there were these riots over immigration. And I've always found Gavin Newsom an interesting figure, actually, because he's a fellow competitor of us, Dan, actually, because he does have a podcast, Gavin Newsom.
Yeah.
But he's an interesting political figure because he almost encompasses the two parties. I saw something recently about a Republican who voted for Trump saying that they'd actually vote for Newsom if Newsom was president, or they voted for Newsom, I think it was, in the gubernatorial elections. So I don't honestly have too much of an opinion on it, but I do think Gavin Newsom in himself, he is the governor of California, the world's seventh largest economy in itself. And I do think he's a fairly formidable figure. And I think if Trump does lose the support of Gavin Newsom, he's only going to further stoke this fire of discontent that lies in California. And it only goes to harm him. Yeah.
I do think Newsom's played incredibly well what has happened the last couple of days. I mean, you look at some of his posts and it is a bit childish, but at the same time, it does appeal to a section of society that requires a bit more show, a bit more scandal, a bit more flamboyancy. You know, Gavin Newsom telling Tim Homan, Trump's borders are, come get me, tough, end quote.
Yeah. God, yeah.
Or telling a governor of another state, stick to football, bro.
Yeah, I mean, American politics Twitter interactions could literally never happen in the UK. Yeah, they're just totally alien to us. Yeah.
I do think he's playing incredibly well because this sort of notion of the spectacular, a bit of a show, giving the people a bit of a show, is exactly what Trump does. And Newsom has taken this to another level.
Yeah.
I think he's preparing for a presidential run. I'm going to call it now, a couple years early. But I think he's preparing for a presidential run.
And I think actually he would have a strong case if he can sort of keep an upwards trajectory. Anyways, thank you everyone for listening to the episode. Please do give us a 5-star review. Go follow the podcast. Like us wherever you listen. And also check out our social media. That's probably the best way to stay updated with what is going on in the podcast.
Thank you very much and see you next week.
See you then.